Welcome to the Brothers and Sisters Podcast. This is what's coming up next, so stay tuned.
The white church, in and of itself, white Christianity in America, number one, is a business, is hyper capitalism, and is racist. And, again, when you have a lot of these Black pastors that are trying to emulate these white churches because they want that money, they want that recognition, they want that power and celebrity, they emulate them, even to the detriment and destruction of their own community.
We want to thank tonight's guest, Kim Beal, for going through the topics and the craziness that is the Brothers and Sisters Podcast, the focused craziness that is the Brothers and Sisters Podcast. We had her talk about herself a little bit before, but now we'll get more in depth because I think what she's doing and what she's representing is not only interesting, but also kind of sort of at the forefront as when we look at where we are both as a nation and the Black community when it comes to religion and the church. So Kim, do you want to talk a little bit about your organization, mission, values, the podcast, stuff like that?
Well, okay, I'll tell you a little bit about it. I am a nonconformist, and I've been that since birth, really. And what's happening is I want to challenge the status quo. I want to challenge the institutions that are out here, namely the church. And you'll hear me say things. I'm not anti-theist. I'm not anti-Black church, but I am anti-white church. I am anti-white Christianity. And, I like to talk a lot about the history of the Black church and, what was happening in their role that they played in civil rights and liberation. And there's a lot of religious history that we do not know. And because people don't know a lot about Father Divine and Albert Cleage and a number of other ones that were pretty radical, back in the day. And so what's happening right now is we're just out here, we're making it easy for people to talk about religion, but we're also breaking down some barriers, letting people know that if they are a non-believer, that's okay too. And trying to find, trying to find something in common. Because when I talk about the Black church and the original purpose of the Black church, which was to serve the Black community in many cases, that is where people would go to get groceries if they couldn't make it to the end of the month with the low food supply. In some cases, the churches have the Light Heat program where they can go and get assistance with their gas and light bills and all of those things. And a lot of churches have strayed from that. And what I find a shame is you have a lot of these Black pastors, some of these local churches that are praying that they become a mega church pastor. And when I examine the mega church, it's nothing but hyper capitalism. But in addition to it is victim blaming. Oh, well, you're still poor because you didn't have enough faith. Or you didn't sow your seed properly, and just a number of things that we really need to address because it's violence, and it's violence against the Black community. And, it's just a number of different topics that we can cover. But yeah, we're out here trying to break down barriers, trying to get people to understand and to listen. But I also want to do it from a historical standpoint. And right now I'm working on a documentary that's going to attack some of these same areas.
Yeah, I listened to some of your, not old podcasts, but you had a couple of interviews with people that I listened to and the cursory research that I do before all of my guests come on. Can you talk about, well, I guess I'd start with two things. One, the kind of sort of roots that the Black church has and kind of sort of emulating, I guess, the white Christian church. So I think you talk about some of those things that aren't necessarily unique to us, that are just emulating basically, what white Christianity was doing. And then two, can you talk about the influence of socialism and leftism in the Black church?
Excellent. So basically, what's happened with the church really over the last 70 to 80 years is quite a few of them have taken on or started emulating the white church, because at one point in time, the LGBTQ people were not being persecuted in Black churches. You'll hear them say something, oh, well, the organist, he may be a little funny, but he's okay. He's a good guy, as opposed to the targeted campaigns that you're seeing now. And so when I talk about these things, I take people all the way back to the moral majority, which was, a white religious movement, if you will. Now, a lot of people tend to believe that that movement was created because of abortion and LGBTQ, but you have to go back and look at it from its inception. That movement was started basically because they wanted school segregation. And so they create like basically anti-abortion and LGBTQ. They use those as models because basically people will glom on to those particular topics and try to say, well, everything that's bad happening in this country is because of these people's behavior. But a lot of people, especially the Black church, has not done all the research that it needs, that these white pastors and these white Christians are misleading them. Even up today, with what's happening with people not wanting to take the vaccine, and how Trump and his people were able to throw, a bomb into the mix. And you have all of this confusion out here. So, you have to go back and you have to look at the history, but the white church in and of itself, white Christianity in America, number one, is a business, is hyper capitalism, and is racist. And, again, when you have a lot of these Black pastors that are trying to emulate these white churches because they want that money, they want that recognition, they want that power and celebrity, they emulate them, even to the detriment and destruction of their own community. And, those are things that we definitely need to have more conversations about, and also talking about the radicalism that was, in the Black church. And, if we take it all the way back to when Martin Luther King was out there, during the civil rights movement, you had a number of Black churches that would allow the Black radicals and the Black activists and organizers to come meet in their churches, even if they didn't necessarily agree with it. Then and even now, if you see more than 3 Black people together, they automatically suspect that we're up to no good. And so we needed those meeting places. However, a lot of the Black churches did not necessarily involve themselves in the civil rights and Black power movement because they didn't necessarily want to rock the boat. And so that's why when we had Black Lives Matter and some of these more, modern movements, you have people saying, well, where is the Black church? And it's only a small percentage that participated in that, but that's on par with what happened with the civil rights movement. So, when you go back and you really look at the civil rights and the Black power movement, they were movements of the people, not movements of the church. And what happened was when Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated, basically the Black church tried to take that mantle and put it upon itself, and they were not able to live up to that when it was a people's movement to begin with. And also they haven't researched who were the people that were assisting Martin Luther King. So, you had Bayard Rustin, you had Asa Philip Randolph, who was a Black atheist, an open, atheist, and you had James Baldwin. And, just to give you a little bit of historical tea, James Baldwin had to basically take a step back because Adam Clayton Powell was threatening to put out rumors that Martin Luther King was having an affair with James Baldwin if they didn't silence him. So, it was a whole bunch of dirt. If you want to look into that with Adam Clayton Powell, the name of his book is The King of Cats, and you can get all of that information about that in there.
Sure. Bayard Rustin, I believe, was homosexual also, and out of
Yes.
ardent. I'm not sure if he was. I think he was a communist. Not so. He may have been socialist, but I'm pretty sure he was a communist, which also turned off a lot of the leaders at the time. So now,
and there's a long history.
Oh yeah. Continue. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, no, it was because you had asked me this follow-up question from the
Sure.
beginning. There's a long history of socialism and communism in the Black community. There's a book called Hammer and Hoe. I believe Robin D.G. Kelly wrote that. There's another one called I can't remember it right now, but you have Hammer and Hoe. Oh, and the Liberty Party. That's another book. But going all the way back into the early 1900s, there has been a history there. One person I would suggest that you read up about is Hubert Henry Harrison, who was an outright Black atheist, and he was also known as the Black Socrates. And he worked with the communists and the socialists, but he had to take a step out of there. And this is why you see some of the Black activists now that have stepped out of that particular arena, because of the fact that a lot of these people in these organizations, you have a lot of racism in the socialist and communist communities as well. And then you also have them out here that are basically putting up these tautological arguments, trying to tell us that it's more about class and not about race. But this is the thing, you've tricked us too many times. We know better. So we're not going to help you achieve your goal, and you promise to help us. Then you turn around and say, you got to get it just like we got it. You got it by standing on our backs.
I think about Du Bois and his disgust with the communist movement at the end of his life, right? Not being able to solve what he called the Negro problem, because fundamentally the white worker was racist against the Black worker, right? So right. Again, another avowed leftist who was like, this class over race stuff, yeah, it's not, it's not, it's for the bird. We're post-civil rights.
Exactly, race reductions.
Yes, we're post-civil rights now. And you talk about the place that the Black church has, the Black community. It's really, I don't know if it's endemic. We see it in America generally, it's kind of dissipating, but particularly amongst young Black people, it's dissipating. If you look at numbers from Pew and Gallup, as far as church attendance, as far as even recognizing holidays, right? I remember, we're Black, like Easter, you get dressed up, you go to church, right? That's not really happening as much anymore.
You get dressed up and go party.
Right? What role do you see, if any, for the Black church in a diffused kind of sort of online community that Black people are very much a part of? The whole idea of a meeting place, especially centered on a religion, doesn't seem to be really the way to go, or really the way people are headed. What does the future look like? Is it nonconformity?
Well, I think the future looks like you do you be you determine, self-determination, what you're going to do. But also, again, I do enjoy the fellowship of the church. There are some things that I actually do miss about the church, when they would have the big dinners and sometimes the musical concerts. But one of the biggest turnoffs for me was, you're talking about all of this religion, the Bible, these scriptures, but you're doing everything but that. But you expect the rest of us to conform and to follow these so-called rules that you made up as we went along. And many times it was a matter of abuse, a matter of controlling the people. And again, I feel that the church and their place in the community is being a place where people can come and get the things that they need. As far as you're preaching to them and telling them that they're going to hell, and then basically compelling them to give you 10% plus of their salary, that is for the birds. And that's why a lot of the religious people, especially some of the Black Christians, they don't like to see me come up, because I read the Bible, I understood it, I've done a lot of studies. And once I started telling people that they don't have to tithe, and giving them reasons why, and giving them the resources to go and look it up themselves, because as far as tithing is concerned, the only people, is according to the Bible, the only people that can collect the tithes are Levitical priests, and there are no more Levitical priests on this earth. And if you go over to Judaism and talk to some Jewish people, they will tell you that, their rabbis are not paid. They get these little slips of paper that they take to the shops in their neighborhood, to other Jewish businesses, and that is how they get food and things like that. So everything has been distorted, and it's been commodified in America, but especially in the Black community, because you see these edifices that they're putting up, beautiful buildings. However, now, because of the corona, and then again, there's a quote unquote falling away, these people are losing these churches. They're not getting their, regular donations. They're really angry and upset about this. And you have people like Creflo Dollar, who was stating that he was trying to IPO his church. So that's letting you know their mindset. And again, if what they've been teaching is correct, I would think that the pastors and the deacons will be at the door handing out bags of money to people, because why aren't these pastors and churches being good stewards of their money and having it multiply to go out into the communities and help heal some of the violence in these communities? And some of which they capitalize off of. They don't pay taxes. Yes, the schools are dilapidated. Yes, the roads are messed up, because that tax revenue is being snatched away by the church not paying taxes.
I see why you engender so much not hate, but so much concern amongst some of the sects. I was reading some of the comments under some of your YouTube interviews. You're fucking with the money. You're fucking with people's money.
Yeah.
You're like,
oh yeah, they don't like me.
Oh gosh, yeah.
I mean, but if you're a true,
And there's an old anecdote that we always used growing up, and it was you just basically, when you're messing up, but you say you're fucking up the church's money, pretty much. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's how you hit them where it hurts.
Fuck up the church's
You hit them
money.
where it hurts.
Using scripture.
I mean,
cardinal sin.
Exactly.
But great.
Exactly. And I guess one of the reasons why some people get upset with me is because I don't care. And in addition to that, there is nothing that they can do to me. I'm like, what, you gonna call my job and tell on me? And I was like, well, when you figure out where I work, let me know so I can go on and show up. Because at this point in time, I am free. I don't have to show up to the plantation Monday through Friday doing what they do over there. I loved what I did for a living, but I didn't like the idiots I worked with. That was always a problem, but I don't care, and then also I hit back. You slander me, you meet Mr. or Mrs. Lawyer. The end. Deal with that mean mother. You know what I'm saying? And that's how I do that.
Yeah.
I mean, Creflo and Jamal Bryant having a meeting about you right now.
Yeah.
Jamal Bryant better be talking about all these baby mamas that are popping up in Atlanta.
He's in now?
Be fruitful and multiply.
Yeah. He took over Eddie Long's church. He took over Eddie Long's church.
One. Oh my gosh, I forgot about Eddie Long.
Steady Eddie.
There was some transgression. Yeah, there was some.
Yeah. So the people that you interact with, that try to debate with you, have you ever gotten anyone to see the light? Have you ever have you changed any minds?
I've
changed hearts.
Change minds, change hearts. Those are both of them.
Definitely, and that's why I do the shows. No, but I mean, you're right. Yeah, there are people that we've touched. There are people that, reach out. But, my whole thing is I am here to challenge you to think and live for yourself.
Right.
And I do believe in them having autonomy, making decisions for themselves, having agency over their brains. And the thing is that I'm not even necessarily trying to pull them out of the church. I don't have an issue with people who attend church. However, my thing is that a lot of what you are being taught is not logically sound. And it's okay to question it. And if your pastor is saying that you're sinning by questioning things, and that, you know, having free thoughts, if you will, is a sin, because someone posted that the other day, that's absolutely ridiculous. What's happening is they cannot answer the questions, and they cannot necessarily go toe to toe with us when we're talking about these things, because they're just basically recapitulating things that they have been taught down through the generations. And you know, what's interesting is the world has changed. And they always talk about how the Bible does not change and that it's always the same. And a lot of Christians like to say that about themselves, that they are still the same and they never change. Well, that's a problem, because everything changes in this world. And if you're not changing, then you're dead. So, you know, what's really happening over there, and many of them are scared. And, you know, we've talked about, you know, post-traumatic stress disorder, and you know, a lot of the issues we have been passed down through the generations, especially some of that fear. You know, I'll give you one example. In Wilmington, North Carolina, that's where they had the first and only coup d'etat in this country. And basically in Wilmington, you had a very successful Black community. You know, they were politically active. You know, one was the mayor, and you know, they were, yeah, exactly. And what happened was they got angry and jealous because the Black people were prospering, and they basically chased out and killed, you know, the Black people in the community. They said the river ran red with the blood. And even to this day, they are finding deeds to property that have the names of Black people, but they're shredding it because the white people came in and took the property away. And it's not just Wilmington. This happened all over the country. You had Tulsa, Rosewood, Chicago, Los Angeles, you know, and city near you. Look into the history of where you live. You can find these stories, because even today, you know, you see these people, when they see that we're being successful, what do? They attack us. And, you know, like we were talking earlier, they pathologize the Black community. And that's one of the reasons why I'm trying to factor out the words white supremacy out of my vocabulary and call it white pathology, because that is exactly what it is.
So Walter is a future politician, future elected official, the Democratic Party. I did some work for the Hillary Clinton campaign. Tell us why we're wrong.
Well, okay, so let me okay. I'm not a Democrat. I'm not a Republican. I'm not a libertarian. I am an equal opportunity critic. And what I see with a lot of the Democrats, especially some of these progressive Democrats, is basically they want to be that good white person, right? While still inflicting violence on our communities. And so, as far as the Democratic Party is concerned, I believe that the Democratic Party is, you know, to the right, and the Republican Party are fascists. And the progressives, the ones that are in charge now, many of them are racist. And then they want to turn around and tell us what's racist, and tell us that we're wrong, and then punish us for not conforming to what they want, for not voting for Democrats. And they're not doing anything for the Black community. I posted on something on my wall today about how, and it was by Dr. Anthea Butler, and she was talking about what made her angry about the Biden administration, and how they are acting like they care about Black people when they really don't. And this was in regards to what's happening with housing and unhoused people in this country, because the rent moratorium is up at the end of this month. And for weeks, no one in the Biden administration said anything. And now they're saying that it has to go to Congress, because that, you know, they can't sign an executive order, that administration can't make these changes, that it has to go to Congress. And they know it is not going to pass. And the people that are going to be disproportionately affected by, you know, houselessness and being evicted because of the rent moratorium are Black and brown people. And that's just
particularly women. I just wrote about this a couple of weeks ago.
Exactly. And see, that's just one example of what they're doing, but also them compelling Black and brown people. If you don't vote for, the Democratic Party, then you're not really Black people. Joe Biden said that himself, right? Or are you really Black? And the thing is that I don't feel that we owe them any loyalty. We owe them no allegiance, especially look at what's happening with voter rights. When they struck down Section 5 of the voter rights amendment, basically I told them next was Section 2, and they just attacked Section 2. And the Democrats are saying that there is nothing that they can do. Joe Biden is up there saying that it has to be a bipartisan effort, otherwise he may not support whatever. But with all of that happening, Black people are losing their right to vote. So the way I see it is, we lose, you lose. And we need to attack this and basically play stick 'em up with the Democrats. You're not doing anything to help our communities other than compel us to go out and vote for you, and we're getting nothing in return. And even when they pass that,
getting that out though, this is the issue that I think I have.
I'm coming.
Yeah, getting that out. So let's say we don't vote Democrat, and we're in a two-party system, and Republicans win. Like, what do we get? Will it be better or worse?
Well, to me, it'd be the same thing, because the Democrats are not challenging the Republicans. Even right now, there's a lot of legislation that they can pass in the Senate without any of the Republican support. And I understand about Sinema and Manchin, and I believe that, I have different theories on why they are the way that they are.
Yeah, they're not the only
they're
ones.
not necessarily.
Right. Yeah, there are many more. They're just the two front.
Exactly.
Let's back up.
Exactly.
Back to fifth grade. What legislation can be passed in the Senate with a 51 vote majority?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, see, this is the thing. I know it will be difficult, but the way I see this is the way I see the Affordable Care Act. Go ahead, if we can get it passed, pass it, and let the Republicans spend the next 12 years trying to take away something that is happening, that's helping the general public.
When you have no filibuster,
yeah,
it's a lot easier to unwind shit that's been done.
Yeah, remember?
Definitely.
We had 59, and then we actually had 60, and then Teddy Kennedy died. Scott Brown took over. Scott Brown beat Martha Coakley. Yeah. They did the rest. They got the bill and the passed in the Senate. They did the rest of reconciliation. So it's different. Like right now, it's 50-50 with Kamala being the tiebreaker. It's
right.
The system as is.
It's going to be more difficult.
Now, here's the hard thing. It's more difficult. It's non-existent because of the filibuster. If there was no filibuster, I believe that it would not be a 51-50 vote on anything. I believe it'd be 55, 53, 56. I don't think it would be nearly as part of it. But those weak pussies, weak people in between can ride with the coach of the rest of the party, right?
Yeah.
Because, okay, the party's against it, I'm against it. It's different when you gotta stand on your own 2 feet when there is no filibuster. So it's a tough one. I just can't see. I don't see the benefit of getting rid of filibuster. We see what happened with the Supreme Court. It's obvious. We have it with 177 judges that Trump got through. I mean, we see what happens when you don't have a filibuster or you don't want to stick together. I mean, you see both.
Oh yeah, but see, this is the thing. If we're going to talk about those appointments that Trump made. When Barack Obama was in office, they blocked him for being able to appoint these different judges. And that happened because they lost that midterm, voting process, right?
Yeah.
And that happened because I believe that Barack Obama was listening to the counsel of Joe Biden and wanted it to be bipartisan, when what they should have done when they had that power was to shove everything through and then allow the Republicans to turn around and chase that dream like they've been doing with Obamacare, if you will. But this is the thing. At this point, I don't really see a difference because the Republicans are running roughshod over the Democrats anyway. And a lot of the Democrats actually do agree with some of the Republicans in what they're saying, but they lack the courage to say it in public, to say that they agree with that as well. So they make excuses.
On a federal
Mhm.
level, or on the state level?
Both. Both, because you got to remember, in a lot of the states, the legislature, the state legislatures are controlled by the Republicans.
Yeah.
And that's another reason why they've been, again, with the gerrymandering and redistricting and all of that, so that they can remain in power while they are, technically the minority. And, if I'm going to be honest with you, with this last election with Trump, had he not shut off his mouth about absentee voting and mail-in ballots, he would have won.
Yeah, I agree
He
with
would
that.
have won. Yeah. And so, that whole thing was just an absolute disaster. But Donald Trump, in and of himself, is a symptom of the problem. And, with a lot of people, especially a lot of Blacks out here that are now openly critiquing liberals and moderates and progressives, it's not financially sound for the ones that are trying to make a name for themselves and trying to make money off of this. But these are things that need to be talked about and put out there, because Joe Biden is a racist. And there is nothing that anyone can say to me to make me think any differently of him. And he agrees with a lot of the Republican, talking points, but he can't say it. There have been some times in which he would be at the podium and he would say, well, I'm going to stop talking. When I talk, I get myself in trouble. My people have told me not to say A, B, C, D, and E. And if I'm going to be honest with you, at this point in time, I'm thinking that Joe won't run a second term. And then they, of course, are going to put Kamala in front of us. And like I said, with Joe Biden, that was the very last time that I voted for someone that I did not want to vote for, but I couldn't vote for Trump. And everybody knows, I make this clear, I absolutely detest libertarians.
We could go on forever, especially with the politics. What do you want to leave our viewers with? What message? What you can plug your organization, but what is it? Because you have so much to say. What would you like to leave our viewers with, our listeners with?
I would like to tell them to think and live for themselves. Don't be afraid to ask questions. If anyone tells you that asking questions makes you a sinner, makes you not a patriot or anything, or unpatriotic or anything like that, don't believe it, because we haven't had enough people out here questioning in the first place. And we need to challenge the status quo. We need to challenge these institutions. And most importantly, we need to challenge that white gaze. Don't be afraid. There are more people out here that agree with you than you realize, and don't allow them to bully you and tell you, well, only you're thinking that way. The rest of us think A, B, C, D, and you're talking about X, Y, Z. You're not the only one. And also, there are a majority of people in this country or throughout history that thought that slavery was okay because it was legal. And you have a number of other examples out there like that. And it took somebody to stand up and to say, no, we're not going to take this anymore. We're not going to do this anymore. And again, when it comes to the Democrats and even the Republicans, but especially the Democrats in this party, I feel that we need to stand up and speak up. We lose, you lose, and start letting them lose these elections, in mass, because again, they're not challenging the Republicans. The Republicans are going to get their way, whether the Democrats are in office or not, because they've already proven that they don't necessarily have a backbone. And a lot of the issues that they're putting out here that they say that they support, basically, again, they benefit white women more than they benefit people of color. And, if you go back and look at the New Deal, when they implemented that, they basically turned their backs on the Black community. When that happened, when we had Reconstruction, they turned their back on the Black community as well. Why? Because the Southern whites did not want Black and brown people, particularly Black people, to have any type of parity or equity in this country. And it still happens today. It's just known by a different name.
Kimberly Veal, we could go on forever. We really appreciate your time, the knowledge that you dropped. The organization again was, just so our listeners can go,
Black Free Thinkers. Just look for my podcast. You can find it on Spotify, iTunes. I haven't done it in a while, but I'm going to bring it back because I have a whole bunch to say. I think my last podcast was talking about insurrection at the Capitol.
Yeah.
And believe it or not, I was not outraged by what happened at the Capitol, you know, and that's the reason why you have the Republican Party trying to play Jedi mind tricks right now, because they're scared. If you go back and you look at some of the earlier interviews in the day of and the days after, they were talking about these people know where we live. They had people calling some of these politicians relatives and threatening them. And we cannot allow them to continue to play Jedi mind tricks with us across the board. So again, Black Free Thinkers, you can find us out there. We have a webpage, blackfreethinkers.com. You can find me on Facebook. You can follow me or friend me, whatever. But yeah, you know, my whole thing is that I just want you to think about it. I'm not trying to change your mind. I'm not trying to influence you. I just want you to do some research on your own, because a lot of this information has been hidden from us, especially some of our history. You have to pay money, and generally it's in grad school, not undergrad, to find out about these things. And I'm one of these people. You wrote a book. All right, I'm gonna pay the money to read that book, and then I'm gonna tell everybody about it.
Yeah.
And history is really interesting, and that's why I frame it in such a way that, okay, well, here's the tea, because everybody wants to know the tea, you know. So you know, you just try to make it interesting and appeal to people. But yeah, Black Free Thinkers podcast, and I thank you guys for having me. This was a wonderful, wonderful evening, and I love the conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, we can't thank you enough. You've given a lot, our thinkers, our readers, our viewers, a lot to think about. So on that note,
Excellent.
this was the end of this episode of the Brothers and Sisters podcast.